Yeah.
Before, you kind of alluded to the working principle in this country that the United States has the sole authority to capture, detain, torture, murder any individual, group, or nation. Where is this principle accepted outside of this country?
No.
Do you know of any place else that kind of thinking?
10 Downing Street.
Yeah.
You know where that is? Yeah. And Israel, yes. But, well, Israel gives itself those powers as well, not just the United States. No, I mean, this is the perspective of the rest of the world that we have to come to grips with. That the rest of the world does not think it's okay for the United States to invade, to bomb, to intervene, as we call it when we switch sides and back a different thug. I mean, it's a radically different view from the view of Americans, from the view of progressive, pro-war progressive Americans, whatever those are. You know, there's an entire double standard. I mean, when the president of Ecuador said, "You can have a base here if I can have a base in Miami," everybody thought that was ludicrous, right? Why would a foreign nation have a military base in Miami, Florida? You know, but we have military bases in the majority of other people's nations. When you watch the Super Bowl, the announcer says, you know, without missing a beat, without any sort of emotion, "And thank you to our servicemen and women watching in 177 countries around." And nobody says, "What the hell are they doing there?" You know. But if 177 nations had military bases in our country, we would think something was wrong, right? And when we invade the nation to the left of Iran and the nation to the right of Iran and put bases and ships armed with nukes in the water and what we've got in space and surround the place and threaten it with war, which we're now being told and is being developed as a case in Syria, that if you threaten war, then you have to have the war, right? Wouldn't you expect the people of Iran to be a little worried about that? Once they've already been put on the list of the evil three. But if France were to take over Canada and Mexico and set up military bases along the eastern and western seaboards of the United States and threaten us, you know, would we think that was humanitarian? You know, even if we have concern, even if we don't like the state of Virginia, you know, invading women's privacy and mandating ultrasounds, and so do we want to be bombed to undo that by France? You know, and if France starts bombing us, and some people resist nonviolently, sit back, run to Hawaii, and other people violently fight France, do we think it's okay to kill those combatants but get upset if a civilian gets killed? Do we make that distinction? Or do we just call everybody Americans who are fighting this outrage? Right? I mean, we make very different distinctions when we examine our victims from what we would do, you know, if it was us. Yes?
How do you deal with fear? It seems to me like the hierarchy of needs, many people are below down fear for their basic security. And this is what's played on constantly. So, you know, how do you do that? Just a massive terrorizing of our own population. What has been happening.
You do it with solidarity. You do it with groups like this where people support each other. You go ask those three people in Tennessee who are going on trial how they do it. You look at the models and examples that are around. I mean, if people are afraid, they can't think. And people want that. Well, it's difficult, but you have to try, and they can't, and, you know, you have to give them something to read that maybe they'll have another conversation. I mean, you do what you can, but I mean, this is, you know, in the book War is a Lie, it's not, what I look at is not just particular lies, but particular techniques of propaganda. And, you know, the number one technique is to make people afraid. Then you can persuade them of anything. And you have to tell people, I don't pay my taxes and I'm doing fine. You have to tell people, I get arrested and go to jail and it's fun, you know? And I don't tell the television it's fun. I tell the television I suffered and I want the injustice ended. But in fact, it's far more enjoyable than sitting home and griping. You know? I mean, there's nothing more enjoyable than rallying and protesting and acting in solidarity with your brothers and sisters. I mean, there's nothing, you don't need to persuade people to join a movement like that. I mean, you just have to show people.
Right.
You just have to see it. You have to do actions that are public and visible and inclusive. You have to do actions where some people are risking arrest and some people are just having a safe rally and drag more people into it. To the point, I mean, one year in Washington on the anniversary of Shock and Awe, we had what I thought was the best planned marking of that anniversary that we ever had, although it was much lower scale. Many people didn't like it, because we had a safe rally in a park with a permit, and we had people blocking the streets. And because the police had been instructed not to arrest anyone at all costs, they would drag people out of the streets and they would go back in the streets. And so everybody that wasn't there to risk arrest saw what fun it was to have a dance party in the streets and win in the street too. And became part of something they hadn't planned to become a part of. And were not afraid. And went home thinking, I don't have to be afraid to block traffic and shut down Washington, D.C. In fact, I had a good time. You know? I thought there was somebody else. Yeah.
Yeah. Along those lines of fear and risk aversion, it seems like I as a vortex resistor have learned over many years to overcome the fear factor. Yet I live a very high. Yet I live with lots of risk doing it. But I don't hide from the risk aversion. I don't have risk aversion from that. Now it seems like individuals trying to figure out how to protest their governments have both problems. They don't want to have risk, so they practice risk aversion, and at the same time want to subdue as much fear in their life as they possibly can. So then they become, you know, pansies, right, or patsies. It's easier to just go with the status quo and not shake the boat. But yet when they get into a military combat unit, all of a sudden as a group consciousness, all that goes out the window, and it's like, you know, my brother got my back, and therefore I'm just going to go full speed ahead, and they don't worry about the risk or the fear anymore.
Yeah.
And how does a peace movement grasp onto that same focus to attract more people to have a strong empowerment?
Well, I mean, we can't be exactly like the military. We can't condition people to act without thinking, and we actually want people to think. But I think that we can use the power of friendship and solidarity and group action and example. You know, if we want to, I mean, example is always the strongest lesson, much more than anything we can say. You know, I mean, this is how we ought to be teaching the world to be democratic. We ought to try it ourselves and use the example rather than bombing people into it. I think when people see the peace movement as fun and enjoyable and effective, see little victories along the way, they're much more likely to jump into it. And particularly young people, particularly people who don't have to work 3 jobs to get by, particularly people who are able to put some time and energy and resources into it. People who are able to think enough to understand what is at risk from inaction. The incredible dangers, far greater than being killed or going to jail, from not acting. What is going to happen to the world from military or environmental disaster if we don't do this. There are people who are joining in all the time. When something begins to look fun on television, when Cindy goes to Crawford at the right moment and there's no other story and the reporters are there sweating and they cover her, everybody sees what it is, understands what it means, and sees that it's a fun thing to join in and joins in. When the Occupy movement becomes a corporate television news story, you have an Occupy movement in every damn town across the country, right? Because people understand that it's a movement. Now, because we can only do this when the television stations help us, and we can't, and when they turn against us, it dies, we need to build the capacity to do it ourselves. Nonetheless, you see the potential there.
Except the police economy squashes it. I mean, it got squashed by the police and the aggressive nature that the government came down upon.
It got squashed by brutality, and it got squashed by the news cartel turning against it. But the potential is there when people see something and they believe it's national and they believe it's big and they believe it's going to make a difference and they see what fun it is. They flock to it. And so we can do that on a local level without controlling any billion-dollar media outlets. And people are doing that all the time. And people who are out on the street with the model drone explaining the drones are having people not just talk to them, but join them. So it's, it happens. I think we had maybe one more.
Yeah. Two points. One, we have to understand that war is in the nature of the state, and therefore we can't have peace without getting rid of the state. Tax resistance gets rid of the state and puts us in a peaceful situation. The other thing related to that, which is the basic thing with the patriotism, is that we have to disidentify ourselves from the state. Here we've heard language like we kill anybody into whatever, or when we invaded this place or that, or how people protect their governments. Well, I made a gesture of renouncing citizenship around 1950. Declaring myself a stateless person of the world. Consequently, I take a more objective view of the state, being disidentified from it, and not subject to patriotism.
Well, I thank you very much. I'm going to agree with 2 out of 3. I'm going to say everybody follow his example and be a citizen of the world, not of a nation. And everybody stop saying we attacked Iraq, because we didn't. But Costa Rica is a state, I have to tell you. But you can have a state without war, but we also have to wrap this up and
militarize the police in Costa Rica.
Yeah, they have problems.
Costa Rica's not perfect, but there are states and there are states. And when I looked at the news about Libya and I looked at the news about Norway, they had very, very different problems. Wonderful conversation. Thank you.